I checked 6 AI coding tools against enterprise procurement. Here are the ones that survive. Right now, in June 2026. If you watched my first video, you already know this story. Back in December last year, Microsoft gave Claude Code to roughly 5,000 engineers in their Experiences and Devices group. The team behind Windows, Microsoft 365, Outlook, Teams, and Surface. Adoption climbed to between 84 and 95% within 4 months. By every metric an AI vendor would put in a deck, it was the gold standard rollout. And then the bill arrived $500 to $2,000 per engineer per month, and Microsoft canceled those licenses by June 30. I told that story as the cost discipline lesson. Here's what I didn't expect. On June 30, this year, the end of Microsoft's fiscal year, Microsoft finished pulling the rest of its internal Claude Code access across experiences and devices, pushing engineers onto GitHub Copilot CLI instead. Rajesh Jha's internal memo. Not a fallout with Anthropic, Microsoft is still Anthropic's largest investor, still paying them billions, still routing Claude models through Copilot. It was cost and control. Now here's the part that should sit with you. Claude Code passes every single procurement gate that matters. SOC2, Type 2, ISO2, 7001, ISO 42001, the AI-specific standard, HIPAA, GDPR, default no training, SAML single sign-on, SCIM, zero data retention for qualified enterprises. By the checklist your security team runs, this tool is clean, and Microsoft, the company that helped build half those compliance standards, pulled it anyway. That's the whole reason I'm making this video. If the cleanest passing tool on the market can get pulled at the company that invented half the checklist, procurement alone is not the answer. Procurement gets you in the door. There's a second gate nobody's checklist covers, and that's where this story lives. So today, I'm going to walk you through the 6 AI coding tools that survive enterprise procurement. And then I'm going to tell you about the second gate, the one that decides whether a tool that passes is the right tool to pick. If you appreciate me making this type of content, let me know by gently tapping that like button. Quick thing before the 6. Stay with me because near the end, I'm handing you something you can use in your next procurement meeting, and let's get into it. Before the lineup, the criteria. Quick word on who's talking. This channel is new. You've probably never heard of me, and that's fine. I'm not a YouTuber. I'm an architect. 21 years writing code, the last 6 of them sitting in the exact procurement conversations this video is about. I'm not guessing what your security team asks for. I've been in that room. Now, I want you to understand not just what the 6 gates are, but why each one exists. Because every one of these was written in something that went wrong at a company the size of yours. And to be clear on scope, when I say enterprise, I don't only mean the Fortune 500. I mean any organization over 1,000 engineers. Infosys, Wipro, TCS included. The procurement muscle is the same. One of these 6 is going to feel obvious. One of them is going to surprise you. 1. Security and compliance certifications. SOC 2, Type 2, ISO 2 7001, and for regulated industries, HIPAA. This exists because a vendor without an attested Type 2 report hasn't proven it can hold the line over time. Your security team won't return the email. 2. Identity. SAML, single sign-on, and SCIM for automated provisioning. This exists because when an engineer leaves on a Friday, their access to every line of code in your company has to be revoked on a Friday, not next quarter when someone remembers to deactivate a license. 3. Data residency and training opt-out. Can you stop your code-base training the vendor's model and pin where it's processed for EU sovereignty? This exists because code bases have walked out the door inside training corpora before. 4. Contract and IP. Indemnification on the code the tool generates. A real enterprise data processing agreement, a negotiated MSA, not a click-through terms of service. This exists because an unindemnified output is a liability you eat alone. 5. FinOps, predictable per-seat pricing, or usage-based billing where a single chatty agent can blow out your cloud budget the way a runaway AWS job does. This exists because, as we saw at Microsoft, a tool can pass every security gate and still bleed you dry on tokens. 6. Admin and audit. Role-based access, audit logs, telemetry controls the things that let security see what's happening. This exists because a tool that executes in your environment with no audit trail is a tool you can't defend in a review. 6 gates. This is not a formality. Every one of these exists because something went wrong. If a tool fails any one of them, it stalls. The landscape splits into 2 categories, and the line is blurring. On one side, coding assistance autocomplete, inline chat, edits. On the other, autonomous development platforms agents that take a task and run it end to end. Copilot has a coding agent now. Claude Code is itself agentic. Amazon Q has agentic code transformation. The categories are converging, and that convergence is exactly where the second gate shows up. Let's look at the 6 that pass layer 1. Tool number 1 is the boring pick, and that's exactly the point. GitHub Copilot. It passes layer 1 because GitHub has spent years building the compliance posture Microsoft customers expect. SOC 2, ISO 27001, SSO, SCIM on Enterprise, EU residency since earlier this year, admin controlled training opt out at the tenant level. But here's the nuance most people miss, and it matters more now that Copilot isn't just an assistant. GitHub's IP indemnity, the Copilot copyright commitment, is not the same on every tier. On business, it covers completions and chat. On enterprise, that coverage is complete. On the individual pro tier, it doesn't apply at all. So, if your devs are on pro because it's cheap, you are running unindemnified code generation, including agent output, across your engineering org. And here's the FinOps update you need to know, because my earlier read on this was wrong. On June 1 this year, GitHub Copilot moved to usage-based billing. The headline seat price is unchanged, $19. Business, $39. Enterprise, but beyond the included AI credits pool, it's now pure per-token billing at model API rates. Code completions are still included. The agent features are what consume credits. GitHub added pooled credits and admin budget controls, so it's manageable, but Copilot is no longer the boring flat bill. It's a predictable floor with a usage ceiling you have to govern. Budget for the agent features, or FinOps, will come back to you in Q3 asking why. Copilot is the default for a reason. It's the safest yes in the room, and it now spans both the assistant and the agent categories, as long as you license the right tier and set the budget. Tool 2 is where the story gets more interesting, because it's the one Microsoft itself just proved a point about. Tool number 2 is Claude Code from Anthropic. And I want to be careful here, because this is where the marketing page and the procurement reality diverge. And as we just saw at Microsoft, where the procurement reality and the cost reality diverge too. On certifications, Anthropic has the strongest stack in this entire list. SOC2 Type 2, ISO 27001, ISO 42001, the AI-specific management standard, HIPAA, GDPR, and their default contractual position is that your data is not used for training, not an opt-out, a default. That's genuinely strong. Claude Code is also the tool that sits right on the assistant versus autonomous line. It's terminal native and agentic. It runs commands, edits, files, chains, steps together, which is exactly the kind of tool that burns tokens, and that lands directly in the FinOps gate. Microsoft's 5,000 engineers didn't hit a security wall. They hit a cost wall. 3 caveats your security team will find. Walk in knowing them. 1. If you need EU data sovereignty, you can get inference in Frankfurt, Dublin, Paris, but the base model is still trained in the US. EU residency here means inference residency, not training residency. For a lot of EU financial services teams, that distinction ends the conversation. 2. The IP indemnification is not standard. It's negotiated, and if your legal team signs without pushing on it, you're under indemnified. 3. The FinOps one. Anthropic moved to a hybrid model, a seat fee plus token usage plus a mandatory monthly commit. And the API volume discounts that used to be 10 to 15% were eliminated unless you're committing $500,000 or more a year. That lever still exists above that threshold. The headline seat price went down. But for token-heavy org-running agents, the total cost can go up, and it is less predictable. So, Claude Code passes Layer 1 cleanly, the strongest posture on the list. And Microsoft, the most sophisticated procurement organization in the industry, still pulled it. Not because it failed the gates, because of cost and control. That's the second gate showing up before we've even named it. Tools 3 and 4 are the hyperscaler natives, and they pass for the same reason. They inherit a compliance program already built for the cloud business. Amazon Q Developer, $19 a seat on the Pro tier. It passes because it inherits the entire AWS compliance program: SOC 123, ISO 27001, HIPAA, FedRAMP High. The works. SAML and SCIM come through IAM Identity Center. The Pro tier contractually does not use your content for training, and the IP indemnification is included on Pro, broader than Copilot Business. Q also has agentic features for code transformation and review, so it spans both categories. The catch is that it's AWS shaped if your identity stack isn't already an IAM Identity Center. There's setup work, and non AWS shops tend to look elsewhere. Google Gemini Code Assist. This one has the broadest certification stack on the entire list: the full ISO family, HIPAA, High Trust, PCI, CMEC, VPC controls, the works. And unlike some of the others on this list, the indemnification here is included on both tiers. Google doesn't gate that one behind enterprise. But Google still has a trap: the CMEC, the VPC controls, access transparency. Those are enterprise tier only. The standard tier doesn't get them. And there's a SKU called Code Assist on GitHub that looks cheaper and is a downgrade. So the procurement decision with Google is simple but easy to get wrong. Know exactly what standard includes before you compare it to enterprise, sign the cloud DPA, or you don't buy it. Two tools that pass almost by inheritance. Predictable, boring, approved. I want to be honest about something here, though, because this is where my personal opinion diverges from the procurement result. On paper, Q and Gemini pass the gates. In practice, I've used Gemini for coding, and 6 months ago, Anthropic's Sonnet, even before Opus became dominant, was already the stronger coding model. Q's underlying model is opaque enough that I genuinely don't know which LLM I'd be buying. They pass layer 1. Whether they pass the second gate, the one we're building to, is a different question, and I'll come back to it. Tool 5 is the one you reach for when the public cloud is not an option, when your codebase legally cannot leave your own VPC or your own data center. Sourcegraph Cody. SOC 2 Type 2, ISO 27001 to 2022, SAML, SSO, SCIM. Zero data retention with Anthropic by design. And here's the line your legal team will care about: an uncapped IP indemnification. Most vendors cap. Sourcegraph doesn't. That alone has closed deals. And the differentiator is context and deployment. Sourcegraph was built for the enterprise monorepo, the codebase so large nobody understands all of it anymore. Cody indexes that whole context. And you can run it single tenant in their cloud, or fully self-hosted inside your own AWS VPC. For a bank that's been told no SaaS, that's the door. The catch is, Sourcegraph pulled Cody Free, Cody Pro, and the cheaper starter tier last year. If you weren't already on a full enterprise contract, Cody stopped being an option. Sourcegraph pointed those users to a separate product, AMP, instead. Cody itself is enterprise only, now annual contract. Custom quoted 6 figures a year for most teams. If you're a 40-engineer team trying to pilot without that budget, Cody isn't built for that sale anymore. And HIPAA isn't on their public trust page, so healthcare procures with caution. Niche. And exactly right for the buyer it's built for. Tool 6 breaks the pattern of everything before it. It's the only one built as an agent from the ground up, not an assistant with agent features added on. Tool 6 is where I want to be most careful because it's the one that fits the autonomous development frame of this video, and it's also the newest. Devin from Cognition, the one tool in this lineup that's unambiguously an autonomous development platform, not an assistant. You give it a task and it plans, writes, runs, debugs, and ships. It's the pure agent shape that the assistants are all reaching toward. I haven't run Devin in production myself, so I won't pretend to a verdict I don't have, but here's what I genuinely like. It's web-based, not a CLI fork, and that matters for a tool that executes. When an agent can take actions in your environment, The gate you care about most isn't autocomplete quality, it's audit and observability. Devin invested their SOC2 Type 2 for nearly 2 years now, ISO 27001 to 2022, SAML and OIDC single sign on with Okta and Entra ID. And the part that sells me on the category, an extensive audit log API logins, MCP server changes, guardrail violations, session events all shippable to Splunk or whatever your SCIM is, so you have a defensible trail of what the agent did and why. For a black box tool taking real actions, that observability is the thing that lets a security team say yes. But I'm not going to pretend it's a clean pass, because it isn't. Three gates are still open. 1. There is no published IP indemnification. For an autonomous tool generating and shipping code, that's the gate your legal team will press hardest. It's almost certainly negotiable on the enterprise plan, but it is not standard, and you must ask. 2. There is no SCIM endpoint. Provisioning is just in time through group sync. For some orgs, that's fine. For others, it's a deprovisioning gap. Zero data retention and data residency are not publicly documented. You'll negotiate that into the contract rather than read it off a trust page. Honestly, Devin is the autonomous development platform closest to procurement ready. It survives with specific gates still to close in negotiation and the youngest track record of anything on this list. Right pick for the org that wants a pure agent and is willing to do the contracting work. Not the pick if you need a clean, sign and go, yes, that's the 6. And like I said, that free scorecard is coming up. Now, the second gate, the one the Microsoft story was pointing at the whole time. Here's the thing nobody puts in a procurement checklist. These tools are wrappers. The interface, the editor, the agent loop, that's the part the vendor built. But the reasoning, the code, the decisions that comes from the underlying model. And the model is a black box. You don't have the reasoning for why it took a decision. Most of the time, you don't even know exactly which model you're buying. So a tool can pass every Layer 1 gate SOC2, ISO2, 7001, SAML, indemnity, the lot, and still be the wrong pick, because the model behind it is opaque or weak or both. Procurement checks the vendor. It doesn't check the brain. That's the second gate. Traceability, can you see what the tool did and why? Observability, can you ship the logs somewhere defensible? And model clarity, do you know which LLM is making the decisions in your code base? Look at the 6 through that lens. Copilot and Cody both let you choose the model that's a hedge against the black box. You can pin the brain. Claude Code is Anthropic's own model, so at least you know what's behind the wrapper. Devin's audit log API is the strongest observability play in the autonomous category. Amazon Q and Gemini Code Assist. They pass layer 1 cleanly, and I told you my honest doubt. I don't fully know which LLM I'd be buying, and the coding model I tested wasn't the strongest. They pass procurement. Whether they pass this gate is the conversation you should have with your architects, not your procurement team. And Microsoft is the proof. The cleanest passing tool on the market at the most sophisticated procurement organization in the industry pulled for cost and control. Not because it failed layer 1, because layer 1 wasn't the whole answer. Procurement is necessary. It is not sufficient. That's the whole thesis of this video. If you want more of this kind of breakdown, subscribe and turn on the notification bell. This channel tracks stuff as it happens. A vendor gets pulled, a billing model changes overnight. The bell is how you catch it when it drops, not a week later. Drop a comment with which of these 6 you're evaluating right now, or find me on the channel's community tab, ask me anything, or tell me what you want the next video to cover. Now, the part that's going to feel counterintuitive, because the most popular AI coding tool among developers right now does not make this list. Let me walk through the honorable mentions and why each one didn't make the cut. Cursor. Fair credit first SOC2, a genuinely strong privacy mode. Default on for enterprise, zero data retention agreements with its model providers, SCIM, CMEC, audit logs, but it's a fork of VS Code, and the moment Claude Code landed, the developer favorite slot moved, Cursor's the one it moved from. There's no public ISO 27001 attestation and no HIPAA, which is a hard gate for EU financial services teams, regardless of how good the product is. And there's a subtler trap. Bring your own key sounds like coverage, but agent and edit the features that touch your codebase are blocked from routing through a personal key, and even allowed traffic still passes through Cursor's backend first. Great tool. Newer to most people's radar, but the compliance story is real. SOC 2, Type 2 for about 2 years now, and it's the first AI coding assistant anywhere to get ISO 42001, the AI governance standard. Both audited by Coalfire, an independent auditor, not just a claim on a marketing page. No public ISO 27001 that I could find. So the same EU gate that trips up Cursor applies here too. The product gets real respect, strong context handling, genuinely agentic, ships real work fast. But it just switched to a credit based pricing model, and the complaints piling up are from people who don't know what a heavy day of usage is going to cost them. Respected, not yet trusted on the bill. Codium, the one partly rebranded as Windsurf, it's not even an independent option anymore. Cognition, the company behind Devin, bought it in December for around $250 million and folded it into the Devin brand. Its Cascade agent reached end of life, replaced by Devin Local. If you were evaluating Codium as a separate honorable mention, you're evaluating Devin's little brother and Replit, SOC2, Type 2, and SSO. But it's repositioned itself as a vibe coding platform. It has no clean BAA for healthcare, and its data residency is limited. For traditional enterprise software engineering procurement, it's the wrong shape. Good tools, open gates. That's the difference between an honorable mention and the six. So, what do you do with this? If a peer architect asks me, off the record, which one should I pick? My honest answer is the annoying one. It depends. And here are the questions I'd ask them before I'd give a name. Are you building on Greenfield or Brownfield? A brand new codebase and a 30-year-old monolith are different procurement conversations. How many developers and how experienced? 1,000 senior engineers and 200 junior engineers need different tools. What are your goals this quarter, ship speed or compliance clearance? What are your goals overall? And the one that ties back to the whole first video, how much do you want to spend, and what does your cost envelope look like? Then, and only then, does the answer narrow. If you're already on GitHub and need a tool approved fast, Copilot Enterprise is the lowest friction yes. If you're an AWS shop, let Amazon Q inherit the compliance your security team already accepted. Google Cloud Shop, Gemini Code Assist, Enterprise, not standard. If you want the strongest compliance posture and you'll accept usage based billing and a negotiated indemnity, Claude Code, especially if your devs want a terminal native agentic workflow. If you're in a regulated environment where the code base cannot touch the public cloud, Sourcegraph Cody. If what you want is a pure autonomous platform and observability of an executing agent matters to you, Devin, with the contracting work on the open gates. And the meta lesson. The reason AI coding tool adoption stalls is not that the tools are bad. It's that the conversation gets hijacked by a single open gate, a missing ISO certification, an unindemnified tier, a billing model FinOps can't forecast, an agent that executes with no audit trail, or a model behind the wrapper that nobody can explain. The question is never, is it a good tool? The question is, which gate does it fail, and can we close that gate before the meeting ends? And then which brain is behind it? That's layer one and layer two. That's the whole channel. Like I promised, the actual layer one and layer two scorecard, the worksheet, not just a recap. Score any tool against all 9 gates yourself. It's free on my Substack. Subscribe and it's yours. Plus, every deep dive like this one lands in your inbox first. And thanks for staying to the end. You now know more about this than most CTOs walking into that meeting. If this was useful, the reason it was useful is that nobody else is doing the boring work of reading the trust centers, the DPAs, and the model cards, so you don't have to. If that's the kind of content you want, subscribe. There's a lot more of this coming. Next time, I'm going deeper on layer 2, the agentic coding tools that don't just suggest code, they run it. Because procurement for an agent that can execute in your environment is a harder conversation than procurement for an autocomplete, and the rules are still being written. I'll see you there.